Okay, welcome to the Netivot Shalom Shir. This week's Parsha is Parsha Korach, and it's the story of Korach and his followers who are rebelling against Moshe, Aaron, and ultimately rebelling against Hashem. And as I begin this year, I want to do it in honor of our new grandson, Eitan Tzvi ben Moshe was Yosef Bat Sheva, who came into the Brit of Avraham Avinu today. And may he grow stronger and healthy and giving nachas to all of his family, all Klal Yisrael. So what's this about? The Netivot Shalom is going to discuss what uh, what Aaron was trying to do. And the name of this particular piece is Vaharo Mahu Kitzalinu Alav. And that appears in the Parsha after the rebellion is in full force. Moshe is trying to stop the rebellion. And one of the things he says to them, it says in the Torah, he says, Yaharon Mahu, as to Haron, who is he? Kitilunu alav, that you rebel, that you murmur against him. So let's pick up from there where that pasuk says. So Isa b'ver Avram, b'ver Madomer barashi. To explain what Rashi says, b'shem Tanchuma. Rashi brings the Tanchuma, and he says, Halvishon talisov, shekulan techeles, uvav omdu lifnei Moshe. So Korach and his followers came and wore a talis completely out of blue. Amrlo, and they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Talis, shekula techeles, chayaviv b'tzitzis o patura. We know we have the mitzvah that we learned at the end of last week's parsha of tzitzis. And the mitzvah of tzitzis is to have a psil techeles. How confident tzitzis? One techeles colored thread on the corners of the tzitzis. So he says, here we have a talis that's completely techeles. So do we need to put tzitzis on the corners as well, or is it pater? Amr lehen chayavet. So Moshe said, doesn't matter. You still have to put tzitzis on. The Korach chay b'bchinas gevoa b'avodas Hashem yisborach. Korach was not just a simple Jew. He was amongst the higher levels, the exalted people in serving God. Charisa b'midrash, the midrash says, Omru chachamim. The chachamim say about Korach, Chacham gadol v'ya Korach v'matone Aaron. He was a wise man, and he was one of the carriers of the Aron Kodesh. His service to God was in the higher levels, which is a higher, very high level. But he was lacking one thing. He was lacking humility and submission to God's will. And the message we're going to learn from this is that we have to be careful. No matter how far we are getting and coming what we feel to be closer to God, we have to recognize that we have to do that with a manner of humility. Not to say, well, this is the only thing that's important, just to go to the high levels. The lower level of keeping you humble is equally important. So he was lacking that. And the whole thing about the tchelet color, merumaz al yirat haromavot. It hints at the fear of God and the romamut, the highness, the high level of God. The kanaf and the corners of your tzitzis, of the talis, the kanaf, Mora Amidas Hachna V'Shvelus. That reminds us of the quality of humility and submission to God. But also Shel Korach, the mistake of Korach, Hoysa B'Choshvo Asher Avodas Hashem Mitoch Yiras Aromimus Levad. He thought it was enough to serve God by just reaching these higher levels, below Hachna V'Shvelus, without humility. Gam Ke Yemuchan V'Roi LeKohana Gedola. And he was actually, but for the lack of humility, he thought he could be the Kohen Gadol. He was fitting to be the Kohen Gadol, but he lacked that very important quality. B'zeu Perush, Ashe'ela Tali Shekula Techeles. That's what it means. Is this talis, what's all blue, does require tzitzis. Shesovar She'achar Shehu B'chidas Talis. He thought that once he's in the level of a talis, of being like a talis, Shekulo Techeles, that's all blue, all purple, blue, Techeles color. It's a combination between bluish purple. Bechulo Shesover, he thought She'achar Shehu B'chidas Talis, Shekulo Techeles, Einet Tzorich Chol Tzitzis Hakanaf. He says he's reached that level, he doesn't need tzitzis anymore. Which is the quality of humility and submission to God. Umosha, Moshe answered him, Shechayevet b'tzitzis, he's chayev, has to wear tzitzis. Meaning, Shetzorich gam ke midas hachna v'shvelus. No matter what high level you've reached and are capable of reaching, it's worthless if it's not accompanied by humility and submission to God's will. Even if you go through all the levels, it's impossible to come to to be a Kohen Gadol, to reach the highest levels of serving God without humility. Therefore, he was not worthy of being a Kohen Gadol because of the lack of humility and submission to God. V'zehu, this is what Moshe said to him. What is he? Kitolinu alav, that you murmur against him. And the word ma is very significant. The Haron, yesh lo midas ma. Aaron had the quality of ma. What? Mahani. What am I? Who am I? This was a total level of submissiveness and humility. Commander Omer, as it says, V'nachnu ma, we are what? In other words, we're nothing. Therefore, because of that humility, he was fitting to be the Kohen Gadol, Aaron. It's also explained the intention of saying Aharon Mahu, what is he? It says in Eruvim, Shnei Shanim Umechza Nechlachu Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. 2.5 years, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the schools were debating one point. One said, it's better that a person should not have been created rather than have been created at all. Another one says, no, it's better that a person is created than not being created. In other words, the arguments behind this was one who says a person who should not have been created would have been better is because the person is doing Averis. He's not doing God's will. So maybe rather than sinning against God, it would be better if you're not here. And the other, which I think is Hillel, said, no, it's better that you were created because even if you're doing Averis, you have the opportunity of doing tshuva. So therefore, it's better to be creative. Muvor the Sefer Tshuas Chain. It's explained um, in that Sefer. Asher Eilu v'Eilu Dibur L'Kim Chaim. Both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, their words are the words of God. They're speaking correctly. If a person himself thinks that he should not have been created, Shalibu Shavor, his heart is broken, Bekirbo in his midst. Because Magia Lasos mitzvah, when he comes to do a mitzvah, Yodea, he knows he has no real connection to doing this mitzvah. He's frightened. He's frightened of doing the mitzvah. This kind of person, it's better that he was created. Because Hashem has nachas from him. Because even though he thinks he's not doing the right thing, he thinks he shouldn't have been created, he's brokenhearted about it. If he's doing Averis, he's brokenhearted about it. There are people who do Averis, they don't give it a second thought. He's doing an Avera and he's breaking up about it. And that gives Hashem great pleasure. Even a person who's satisfied that he was created, if he just thinks that everything that he does comes from him, as we said in the Parsha the last few weeks, my power did all this. If he thinks everything came from me, his heart isn't broken in his midst. This person, even if he serves God, since he has no humility and no submission to God's will, he's not living according to the ratzon, the will of God. It's better it would have been created. And this is what Moshe answered to Korach. The Aaron Mahu. Aaron, what is he? Perush. Sharon Libo Shavor Bakirbo Kokach. Aaron Cohen's heart was broken completely. Bechinas v'nachnuma, the aspect of nachnuma. What am I? What am I? Shuboto mevuto be'enei atzmo. He was nullified in his own eyes. He was like nothingness. Umargish, and he felt. Sheinu rui l'shamesh b'avodas Hashem. He felt that he's not fitting to serve God. B'kadosh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. Sheinu l'shum shaychus, he has no connection to it. Everything that he does, and where he serves as a high priest, he's not doing it because he has any worth. He feels he has no worth to do this at all. He's doing it only because he's submitted to God. God has commanded him to do this. Even though he feels not worthy, he's submitting to God's will. And what comes out of all this, Shebagam Korach, Ayu Bagavot Shu Chamur Od. The shortcoming of Korach was an ego trip. He was what's the word I'm looking for? He was haughty, thought he was better than everybody else, and that's a strong problem. It's a strong sin. Shomer Chazal, as the sages say, Shakadosh Baruch Hu al Amitgeya. God says about that person who is proud, overly proud, Ein ani v'hu yochon l'dor b'olam. He and I cannot live together in this world. V'hu mikivon she'inyan hagavos hu sanoi lifnei hamok. Because of his arrogance that was the word I was looking for before. The word of his because of his arrogance, he is not fitting to uh, to serve God, to come. Uh, so this because of his arrogance, he's not able to serve God. And this concept that God said, I can't dwell in him in this world. He says, he goes on to say, this aspect of arrogance is hated by God. The sin of Korach was so great that he was lost from the nation. As he says, those who are lost come from the land of Ashur. What does that mean? He says, Ashur, who inyan gavos. Ashur is like the word of wealthiness. An aspect of arrogance. Shutakif badato v'libo shalei b'kirbo, because he's perfectly happy in his heart that he's accomplished all of this. Valke nikra oved, and therefore he's called lost. She'ein b'shvilo tshuva, because there's no tshuva that he can do. It doesn't mean that if he would do tshuva, God wouldn't accept it. God always accepts tshuva. But it means that he's in such a state of thinking that I've done everything so well, I'm perfect. I don't need to do tshuva. So there's no tshuva for him. Given shekol kamash osa tshuva is chazak libu b'kirbo od yoter. Anybody who does tshuva strengthens their heart more and more. They must speak in biyadu lasos tshuva, and the person isn't able totally to do tshuva. And I think that's talking about the person who's arrogant. Even in other matters where he's able to serve God, we call Malcolm Kivin She'ein Lo Hachna V'Shvelo, since he does not have humility and submissiveness to God. Ein Mesugal Lasos Tshuva, he's not able to do tshuva. V'Hareu B'Chinas Oved, and he's like the person who's lost. And this is what is said about Korach. Yovdu mitoch hakol. He was lost from the congregation of Israel. Shai de pegam hagavos niul ovdim. He was like the lost people. V'hinei gam b'Shabbos Kodesh. Motzinu inyan. We also find the same thing on Shabbos. Hafuch boshes v'tishkach Shabbos. You turn around embarrassment and you take the words Boshes, Beit Shin Tov. You turn it around and it's Shin Beit Tov, Shabbat. Shadamcha Habusha, only through shame, feeling ashamed, Nichnasim Shabbos, can you go into Shabbos? Feeling ashamed that you haven't done what you're supposed to be doing all week long. And how are you going into Shabbos? That's the ticket that gets you there. As it says in Pirkei Avos, Memorial Saba Kodesh Nishlom Shulenu, Shebechidas HaShabbos, Ushakadosh Baruch Hu Machnis Bo Es Yehudi Elov Lehichalo Kulo Rekavod. On Shabbos, God brings the Jew closer to him into his holy chamber, where he can sees that everything is the glory of God. Shabbos he bechinas Kohen Gadol, and Shabbos is like the high priest, the Kohen Gadol. Hanichnas Kadosh Hakadosh, going into the Holy of Holies. Kmo Sharon HaKohen Lohe Yochel Agilios Royally Kanes Kodesh Hakadoshim Rak Aide Midas Habosha Vachna. Aaron was not able to go into the Holy of Holies except through this quality of being ashamed of himself and submitting to God and having humility. Command Amar Rabbi Chaim Vital, whose ladies is Rabbi Chaim Vital said, Amash Amar Moshe Aaron, that which Moshe said to Aaron, Lama atabosh l'kach livcharta. Why are you embarrassed? Aaron didn't want to go in there. He didn't want to go into the Kodesh Kadosh. He said, how can I do it? And Moshe said, no, of course you have to do it. This is why you were created. Because of this, he was ashamed to, no, you were ashamed, but this was the reason you were chosen to be a Jew. You were chosen to be the Kohen Gadol. Because of your shame and your brokenheartedness. Shoyla Aaron, which was with Aaron, because of that, oh, you really caught us the Kodesh Kadosh. He was fitting to go into the Holy of Holies. Baldas Zeh, Ikanises Yehudi l'Shabbos Kodesh. And under this kind of a concept of being ashamed of what you've done all week, your Averos, being ashamed of your Averos, and being humble and submissive, through that, a Jew is able to go into Shabbos. The Bechinas Achnisa Kadosh Kadashim, in the aspect similarly as if you're actually entering the Holy of Holies. Shaderech rak ayidei habosha. The way is only through feeling ashamed. The tokshem misbone b'matzavo when hagaso b'chol yemos hashvua. From thinking about your matzav and contemplating about that all the days of the week. And if you feel that you've come up short, which all of us, I can't imagine any of us who don't, you're embarrassed because of that shortness to the Shabbos. And that's embarrassment what gets you there. Kamar Shabbos Kodesh, Misloni, Mishukal Lady said, Amamar Chazal, it says in the Mishnah in Shabbos, literally means a person has to examine his garments before dark, Erev Shabbos, to make sure that he's not carrying anything by accident, that nothing's in his pockets. That's the literal translation. But Sha'asin Neged Ratzon Hashem, really, when it talks about Bigdo, it's talking about you're neged, you're against God. You're doing things against the will of God. You have to check very carefully. Erev Shabbos im Chashecha, Friday before it gets dark. Ba'yedei zeh Amar Rabbi Yehuda Hilchas Rabasi l'Shabbos. Hilchas is the same for Shabbos. Shezel Halicha Achnisa Rabsi l'Shabbos. This is how you go into Shabbos. Yuchadim. Going back a second to Chai Vada Lamashmas Bigadav. Bigadav means those things where you were treacherous to God. The Jew must search out his deeds that he did wrong during the entire week to go into Shabbos. And that's what it really means. Not just a reminder to make sure you don't inadvertently carry, but Begadav, Mashmas Begadav can also mean searching out those things where you were a bagade, somebody contrary to Hashem. And these two things come together. You can't just approach God only through feeling ashamed. Because that's above nature. Kivin Shalpi Teva, because according to nature, Elilod Isha Hakrotz Mechomer Yocheli Kadosh Kadashim. A person born of a woman who's so immersed in the materiality of this world, he's not able to go into the Holy of Holies. A Jew cannot go in through his natural capabilities alone to Shabbos. But how? Just by the power of nullifying yourself that you're ashamed for what you've done. That's why you were chosen as a Jew. You were chosen as a chosen people. You were chosen to keep Shabbos. Kodesh HaKadoshim. Through that busha, through that feeling of being ashamed, are you able to go not only into Shabbos, but into the Kodesh Kadoshim? And the message that he's giving us is a very, very important, but a very simple message. You want to serve God, you need to serve God through humility. You need to serve God recognizing that, as we say in the morning brachas, Shasari called Tzorki, that God has given me all my needs. Recognize that everything that you have only comes from God, not from any powers that you have. Whatever money you earn or you don't earn, that's all determined on Rosh Hashanah for the next year. And it really doesn't matter what you do or don't do. That's the amount of money you're going to get. Everything is B'dei Shemayim. Everything is the hand of God. God chooses what will happen to you. And all you have to do is have the emunah to believe that. And then you'll be able to enter into Shabbos and Ki'ilu, the Holy of Holies, just like the Holy of Holies. Okay, I'm going to turn off the recording.